옥정고 3학년 1학기 기말 4
Test.
1회 19번.
There's a difference between a story and a plot. They may seem to be the same thing, a narrative account of some action with a beginning, middle, and end, but they aren't. A story, as opposed to a plot, is the straightforward account of everything that happens in the order that it happens. A plot is the way events are selected and arranged with an emphasis not only on what happened but on why it happened. In other words, plots involve cause and effect, not just one event following another. The English novelist E.M. Forster illustrated the difference between story and plot by this example. Here's a story. The king died and then the queen died. This is a succession of events, simply organized temporally. This happened and then this happened. Here's a plot. The king died and then the queen died of grief. Events are now connected by cause and effect. The death of the king led to the death of the queen from grief. For Forster, a story asks, and then, X happens and then Y happens. A plot asks, why? Test.
3회 20번.
The phrase, I have nothing to hide, has become popular in discussions about social media companies that collect all of the personal data they can get their hands on. You might hear it from users who prefer to pay with their data, not with their money, and the phrase could well hold true for those of us who live uneventful lives without any serious health issues, have never made any potential enemies, and wouldn't speak up on civil rights denied by a government. Yet the issue is not about hiding or the freedom to post pictures of adorable kittens at no cost. Tech companies don't care whether or not you have something to hide. Rather, because you don't spend any money for their services, they have to employ psychological tricks to get you to spend as much time as possible on their apps. You are not the customer. The customers are the advertisers who pay tech companies to grab your attention. Many of us have become glued to our smartphones, find hardly any time for anything else, and eagerly await another dopamine shot via each new like.
17강 2번.
Symbols are instrumental in helping people derive meanings from social situations. In social encounters, each person's interpretation or definition of a given situation becomes a subjective reality from that person's viewpoint. We often assume that what we consider to be reality is shared by others. However, this assumption is often incorrect. Subjective reality is acquired and shared through agreed-upon symbols, especially language. If a person shouts, fire, in a crowded movie theater, for example, that language produces the same response, attempting to escape, in all of those who hear and understand it. When people in a group do not share the same meaning for a given symbol, however, confusion results. For example, people who did not know the meaning of the word fire would not know what the commotion was about. How people interpret the messages they receive and the situations they encounter becomes their subjective reality and may strongly influence their behavior. Test.
1회 23번.
Animals often compete over food, a mate, a territory, or some other resource, but rather than jump immediately to physical fighting, individuals typically engage in non-aggressive communicative displays, like the roaring of red deer, the jousting displays of stock-eyed flies, the croaking of European toads, or the loud wahoo calls of male baboons. Ethologists now have a good understanding of how these displays have evolved. That is, why they are evolutionarily stable. In red deer, for example, roaring is energetically costly, so only males in good physical condition can roar repeatedly, for long durations. Moreover, the acoustic features of a male's roar are constrained by his body size, so only large males can produce deep-pitched roars, and larger males are more successful fighters. As a consequence, a male's roaring cannot be faked, because small males and males in poor condition cannot produce low-pitched roars at a high rate. And roaring serves as an honest indicator of size, condition, and competitive ability. Test.
2회 23번.
The context of children's exposure to regional variation of a language may play a role in how it is interpreted for social meaning. Kinsler and De Jesus conducted a study of 5- and 6-year-old children in the northern and southern U.S., and found that they were not equally able to identify or assign social evaluations to those regional accents. Children from the north, where the more prestigious dialect is spoken, could reliably identify it and showed social preferences for speakers with a northern accent. Children living in the southern U.S., where a less prestigious regional variety is predominantly spoken, were at chance when identifying the varieties, and showed no social preferences for either accent. The crucial difference is that southern children typically have exposure to both northern and southern accents, whereas northern children would mainly have exposure to the northern accent. In this context, hearing multiple regional varieties did not give children an advantage in awareness of regional variation.
19강 5에서 6번.
Since the 1970s, a combination of forces has made the problem of overwork more widespread. The service sectors in Western economies have grown dramatically while employment in manufacturing has declined. The shrinking of labor unions and workplace protections has let employers push for longer hours, while global competition, decreased job security, and flat wages have forced workers to work harder to stay in place. Corporations now shed staff in the course of restructuring and process re-engineering, forcing surviving workers to carry heavier workloads. The 2008 recession and recovery has reinforced a pattern in which companies seek to grow by increasing demands on existing workers rather than hiring new ones. A few industries have turned into fast-moving, winner-take-all contests. Small numbers of people stand to make immense fortunes when their tech company goes public, their hedge fund investment pays off, or their song goes viral. And since no one knows how long they have until fashions change, technology evolves, or the bubble bursts, it makes sense to go all in right now. As a result, many of us are actually working longer hours. Working hours generally decline with increased productivity, but in the 1970s, increased productivity stopped yielding shorter working hours. Despite the expectations of generations of economists, working hours started to rise in the United States in the 1980s, especially among salaried workers and professionals like doctors, lawyers, bankers, and academics. In contrast, working hours, and full-time jobs and salaries, in less skilled, hourly professions began to fall. Since then, this split has spread to other parts of the world. Today, well-off, well-educated people in Western Europe, Australia, and South Korea are also more likely to be overworked, while more poor people struggle to find stable jobs and face chronic underemployment.